Hey everybody, this is Dan. Live for some art camp, paintovers and discussions again. I'm going to be going long today, so I might break this up into a couple sections. I'm not sure yet, but either way, I'll be streaming for a while. Today we're going to be looking at this piece by Jeremy Gordon. And the reason I chose this one was because this is a really good example of something I can use to do like a long form design critique. This was done basically as a test image for the Dungeons and Dragons art test that I believe was on Art Order that went out a while ago. But yeah, so basically this is a culture developing exercise. These are they're very northern, very Viking influenced characters. So I'm going to be pulling reference from that. But yeah. Basically, we're going to be looking at what works, what doesn't work, how to push certain elements, things like that, how to really imply what the culture is, just little things like that. And hopefully by the end of it, we can get these to a place where they're a bit more established. As you can see over here, this might be a little blurry, I'll zoom in. I've got some references that I shot directly from life. That's a black shirt over my computer monitor in the background. This is a statue I have of, I believe, Sigurd or Eric the Red. It's somebody, but anyway, there's no name on the base. But this is a statue of an actual, Viking hero wearing some armor and stuff sculpted in the 1800s that, is good for a general culture base, good for a lighting base. Yeah, there's some good stuff here. Obviously, there's a few elements in it that are a little more operatic, not necessarily historically accurate, like, the wings on the helmet and stuff like that. But the rest of it, the cloth, the chainmail, the leather straps on the legs, all this stuff is good. So I just wanted to pull those up and show them. I'm going to put them on my other monitor while I work, and I might glance over at them for, some lighting and design stuff as we go forward. But yeah, so amazingly, I'm still not over being sick, which is mind-blowing to me. It's been 3 weeks, and my sore throat's gone, the tonsillitis is pretty much gone, but my throat is still kind of raw and weird from being sick for so long, so if you hear me sounding weird or like if I cough or anything, I apologize. I can't really help it. It's just not going away. So I'll put the chat up over here if anyone has any questions or anything they want to ask, feel free. And I'm just going to get into it. I pulled up some references here. One from my reference Tumblr that has some accurate Viking elements. And then over here, another one from a culture book that I use a lot of stuff from if I'm building from real cultures that has some other accurate Viking elements in it. But the first thing I want to talk about, probably the biggest thing I want to talk about really, is that this is designed for Dungeons and Dragons. And the one thing you're going to hear time and time again from people that just want something to talk about, like the biggest non-crit you're ever going to get in your entire life from people in the concept art illustration world is that Vikings didn't have horned helmets, so you're wrong, go back to the drawing board, your design sucks, blah blah blah. But this is for Dungeons and Dragons, and your response to those people should always be, yeah, but dragons didn't exist, neither did magic, neither did elves. None of that shit existed, so who the fuck cares if I put horns on a helmet? Like, it can still feel like the culture and have, nods towards what actually existed without going full real. I mean, if every culture in a fantasy game was based completely on reality, it'd be a very boring game. Design-wise, it'd be an extremely boring game. Everything would feel too familiar, would feel too tame, would feel too weird, and not fantasy enough. So yeah, don't worry about that stuff. Okay, so let's see here. Trying to decide. I guess I'll keep it in color. I was trying to decide if I wanted to just focus on the design or if I wanted to focus on the painting. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in and start looking for little things in the drawing that I want to fix. So like these horns, they should be bigger at the base. They should flute out a bit more at the bottom. They just don't feel impressive enough. Second thing with the conical helmet, it needs to come up into a point more. Just because it's really hugging the top of his head right now. It needs a little bit more of a buffer up there. Actually, I'm just going to zoom in and start top down, I guess. Okay. So, the thing about Viking culture, basically, that you want to keep in mind is that everything about their culture design comes from the fact that they were an assimilation culture. A lot of people ignore that when they design them. They just give them the basic tropes, like, you know, fur and horned helmet and an axe, and they call it a Viking. But the thing about Vikings specifically was that they were sailors and that they assimilated things from all the countries they went to and that they took things from. So they really had little bits and bobs from all over the place, all different kinds of things. There were Celtic elements from things they got in England or at the time Northumbria. There were things all the way from Persia that made it into Viking stuff. You know, they'd go to trade routes in Russia, and then they'd move down towards the Mediterranean, and they'd get all kinds of crazy stuff from Persia, from Greece. You know, they had stuff from all over the place, even North America. Like, they were assimilating things from everywhere. So the worst thing you can do to a Viking design, if it's supposed to be rooted in a sailing culture, which is what they are, is make a tame design that where everything feels like it fits, because that's not what they're about. You want to have some elements that stick out. You want to have some weird random stuff. Those little accents are what's going to sell it as an assimilation culture, because they didn't make, you know, 70% of the stuff that they had. They stole it, or they retooled it from stuff that they had stolen. They'd steal metal, melt it down, make new things out of it, or they just re-etch it, or they just keep it the way it was. Like, they had all kinds of stuff from all over the place. But that's the biggest thing, is most of the stuff they had came from elsewhere, and then they repurposed it. But yeah, they were thieves basically. So you want to have some weirdness in here. You want to have some little. You don't want to have a totally symmetrical design, because then it feels too ordered. It feels like a uniform. This wasn't a culture, and cultures based on Vikings shouldn't be cultures where there's a uniform. It should be a culture in which it feels like, you know, they're kind of just put together from the things that they're finding. But yeah. There can be elements that they all share that tie them together as a group, but you never want two of them looking the same. That's basically the thing. Short of, like, you know, the guards that would work for like a king or something in this culture, no two costumes are going to look identical. That's a big thing. You know, there might be similar armor sets for people that are in like a guard or something like that, which is what I was just talking about, but short of that, everybody kind of defined their own look based on what they had stolen, based on, you know, what gods they prayed to out of the, you know, the pantheon that the Vikings had. Yeah, everybody kind of had their own thing. I'm going to put some bracers on this helmet to hold the horns in place, and that's going to give me an opportunity to repeat the studs. So keep in mind also when you're designing something for Dungeons and Dragons, which is what this piece was for the art test. Dungeons and Dragons is a game about, you know, people pretending to be adventurers going down into dungeons and fighting dragons. You know, it's about discovery. Oh, hey Alejandro, yeah, this is live. I'm doing a long paintover and a design discussion. But yeah, so basically, you want designs that are going to make the characters want to play the game. You want to, I mean, basically the root of the game is discovery. That's basically, if you had to boil Dungeons and Dragons down into one word, it would be discovery. It's about the treasure people find down in the dungeons. It's about the monsters they encounter. It's about the locations they see. It's about the characters they meet. The whole game is basically boiled down into discovery. So you want characters that reflect that idea. So the more, you know, weird, cool things you put on a character without breaking the design and, you know, making them loaded and stuff, the more it's going to feel like, oh, you know, I want to be that character. You know, what is this guy? How did he find that? What is that thing? You know, that's sort of the stuff you want to think about. So, like, one person who's really good at that is Wayne Reynolds. If you guys are familiar with his work, he draws art the way that the target audience wants to see that art drawn. He does these characters that are totally loaded in stuff they found in the dungeon. They look like people that are actually like holding on to all the loot that they found. Like, he really, really layers the characters. Some of them get a little busy, but I really like his work. I like the fact that he's not worried about doing, like, you know, here's my very clean, very, very crisp armor design. Like, he's more like, okay, these people have been running around in an underground cave for 5 years, and, you know, here's all the weapons they found, and here's all the straps necessary to hold those weapons in place, and, you know, here's all the belts that they're going to need to carry, all these pouches for their blah, blah, blah. And, like, he really does do a cool job of making stuff visually interesting that fits that kind of dungeon running game. Which is why, you know, he was like a lead 2D on Pathfinder, on Dungeons and Dragons, on all kinds of stuff. But, yeah. One thing I'm doing now, just very quickly, I'm making his hair a little more unkempt, a little longer, a little frillier. Just because, you know, again, with this culture, seafaring culture of people that go out and pillage and stuff, they're not taking showers and, you know, washing their hair with Pantene Pro V and, you know, making sure it's conditioned and, you know, putting hot oil in their beard and straightening it. And that shit's not happening. What's happening is they're going out, they're sweating like crazy, they're not really bathing. They're riding boats, they're getting salt water and sweat and all kinds of God knows what in their hair, and then it's drying there. And it's going to be kinked, and it's going to be curled, and it's going to be kind of gross. And, you know, that all this little stuff you don't really think about informs the narrative. Even if people don't really think about it when they see the design, it makes it something look right as opposed to something look wrong. You know, someone who's too clean isn't going to fit that story. They're not going to fit that idea of, you know, where the character's been, the lifestyle that they have. So yeah, just think about that. Think about what this guy does and design from there. Design from, you know, purpose and consequence, basically. This guy does certain things. What are the consequences of those actions? Are they going to inform the design? And if they are, you need to include them. I mean, it's very tropish, but that's why, like, you know, the scar on a face is such a huge design element that people overuse. It's just because it's a very fast way to tell a story. It's, this guy got in a fight and almost died, but he didn't. That's all that is. Every time you see a scar on a face, it's just forcing a narrative of, this guy almost died once, he got hit with a weapon, he survived. It's just forcing a background. Same thing with tattoos. depending what you do with a tattoo and a design, it's a super trope. But you know, tattoo of a cross on a dude, oh, he has faith. Tattoo of a skull on a guy, oh, he's he's dangerous. Like, it's a really tropey, quick way to just force what you want the character to be onto people without actually thinking about it and designing in like a creative way. But yeah, nothing wrong with that. You can still use things like tattoos and stuff well in a design, but you wanna put some thought behind it. You don't just want to go, well, this guy doesn't look as scary as I wanted him to, so I guess I'll put some badass tattoos on him and maybe that'll make him scary. Like, if the character doesn't work, redesign the character. Don't just throw shit on top of it to busy it up and make it look, just, literal. So you had a shorter beard in yours, which I'm going to try to respect. But even with a shorter beard, it's still going to be very unkempt. So I'm going to show a bit more of his chin than I was originally going to down here, just to keep it closer to your design. But I'm still going to frill the edges like crazy, make it messy, all that stuff. I mean, beards are messy things. Trust me. I've got one. Unless you're, cleaning it every day and straightening it and putting product in it, it's not going to lay flat. It's going to typically lay whichever way you slept on it. Because you sweat in the night, and then the sweat dries, and then it sticks whichever way you were laying on it, because it's almost like glue. So if this guy's not taking a shower every day, washing it out, it's not going to do that. The war paint on his face doesn't really make sense with the culture, but I'm going to leave it for now. I might come back to it. That looks kind of, I don't know, it looks too simple. The Vikings were very big on decoration. They were very, their design influences were from all over the place. So as a result, their designs became very eclectic and very, very, very detailed and very weird. And they probably have one of the most, I don't know, what's the word? The most, I guess unique. It's not the word I was going for, but they've got one of the most unique design cultures because they were pulling from so many places. They made it all work together, though. It was just kind of like, you'll see geometry, you'll see figurative, you'll see lots of swirls, lots of floral patterns, but they made it all work. So because this guy's not really showing any skin at all on his forearms or his legs, I'm going to assume that you're going a little more north than typical Viking. Still Viking influence, but it almost looks like these are like Viking Inuit hybrids. So I'm going to stick with that, build from there. First thing I'm going to do with the thing down here is drop this down to above the knee because there's no reason for it to be as short as it is. also going to open it at the bottom. You're kind of falling into the, we've talked about this on here before, so I'm going to mention it real quick. You're falling into the rectangle character design trap, which I'll, if you don't remember talking about it before, I'll quickly explain it here. Not so much with the girl. I mean, it's still there, but not as much. But with the guy, if I grab a, bright red here to explain this, everything, if I shut this layer off that I was working on, everything over here kind of falls on a straight line, and everything over here kind of just falls on another straight line, and nothing's really breaking up the silhouette in the body. The bow comes out, but that's not part of his pose, and the cape comes out, but that's not part of his pose. His body is very much just in this box. So I'm going to try to break that up a little bit. At least with the girl, you've got an arm coming out, you got this arm on the hip, you've bent the knee a little bit. It's a little bit better. So it would take a long time for me to crit the design and fully paint this thing out. I might paint some parts of it out. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how far I want to go with this crit, so bear with me. I'm going to definitely focus on the design first, because that's what the problems are stemming from in terms of the interesting character. But yeah, once we get done with that, I might paint some stuff out. I'm just not entirely sure yet. You grab this color you got. It's the fur lining at the bottom. So the next thing I'm going to do is grab, I'll use white actually. I'm going to just quickly, okay, so yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is a little too baggy. Crotch should be about here. Okay. Sorry, I was just roughing in some quick anatomy just to look at where basic things are going to fall. Gonna raise this up a bit. I'm gonna probably turn it into something more than a sash. Or maybe I'll put a sash under what I want to put here. Okay. So he's just kind of holding his horn for no real reason. Something about this feels weird. The horn's not attached to him and the arm's just kind of holding it, but he's not getting ready to blow it and he's holding it backwards, kind of. I might just get rid of this. Yeah, I think I'm gonna totally change that arm. Something about that arm coming forward and just holding this here, not really doing anything with it, just sort of there, is bothering me. Play with some stuff here to get that arm out of the box a little bit. It's not, I mean, yeah, it does look stiff. We already talked about that, but specifically holding a horn this way, where he's holding it, is not, it doesn't make any sense. Oh, whoops. I painted over the bottom. Give me a second. Occasionally that happens. I don't have enough step backwards. It's okay. I'll paint it out real quick. There. Yeah. I did talk a bit about designing for D&D. Sorry you tuned in late. If you have any specific questions, though, just put them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. Even if I already talked about it, I'll answer it again. More than happy to do that. So yeah, feel free. These these sleeves should be longer too. Just having that big empty, sienna sort of sleeve is kind of boring. So bringing this down will interrupt that a bit. It'll, they're from like a cold place, right? I mean, that's what it looks like you're designing them as. More northern Viking than, the usual, so. Instead of having that big, like, literally elbow macaroni shape of orange, bring that sleeve down and cover up a bit of it just to balance out the design. Just gonna quickly bullshit some implied wrinkles just to get a sense for where this is going. Okay, so yeah. I think what it is that his arm is bent in a way that it looks like it's supporting weight, which would make sense if it was hitched into a belt or something. Like if his hand was gripping the edge of a belt or something like that, that would make sense. But he's kind of just flatly holding a horn, and the horn is at this weird angle. Typically, when you see a horn on somebody's hip, the back end is down at the bottom because of gravity. It's the heaviest side. And the front end is up here, which, you know, very quickly, if I rough that in, if he just raises his arm to his mouth, that means the side that you blow in is at his mouth. He's holding it backwards right now, which is kind of weird. But I think it's a bigger problem than that, too. I think I might need to change the arm entirely, which is what I had mentioned before. So yeah, if I fix it and make it right ways, it's still very flat and weird. So I'm going to keep the horn there, but I think I'm going to move the arm. Seconds, guys. Grabbing my coffee. Do Wizards of the Coast commission character design art like Paizo? Because I have mostly seen just illustrations for D&D. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They go into the companion books usually, but Dungeons & Dragons does commission more illustrations than Paizo. In general, they just do commission more. But, yeah. They still have portraits, they still have character designs, you know, they still have, actually, I can actually show you a really good example of what I'm talking about. One of my all-time favorite artists, Tyler Jacobson, is like Mr. Dungeons and Dragons, basically. He's like the guy. So, I'm going to post this link in the chat. I'm going to pull it up on the screen, since we're talking about D&D today. Basically, so if you look at this, this is basically just 5 character designs in front of an environment. You know, that's basically what's going on here. Same with this one. Same with this one. You know, the characters are on layers too, so... But yeah, so that's all this is. It's just character designs in front of a background, and I guess you can call that an illustration, but it's really just character designs. But he did another one. Hold on, let me find it. He did like all of the big D&D characters, basically, in like a huge lineup that they commissioned, and they wanted them separate. So if you look at this one, this is an illustration made of pieces, basically, if you go further back on his blog. So he designed the character. Here's a character design for D&D. This is an example right here. This is all on his blog, by the way. So he designed the character right here, and then he put the character in this illustration. But this illustration, you know, started with just, you know, these characters, building it up. So if you look at the background here, there's, you know, the first layer of characters. Then a second layer with Drist and some wizard dude. Third layer with the new guy popped in right there. So these are all on layers, so they can take them and reuse these designs that he's doing for other things. But yeah, there's another one somewhere. Oh, here it is. This is like every D&D character, basically, like all the big main characters in the new thing they're doing. But all of these are on a layer. It's like when Brad Rigney did his Planeswalkers. I don't think those were on layers. I can't remember if Brad had to separate all of them, but I know with this one, all these characters are on layers, so they can take them and use them. But yeah, because see, here they are in their own illustrations with backgrounds. So here they are individually pulled off that main image, and here they are, you know, as portrait zooms. And then, you know, he puts all of them together in a big lineup that does like a splash image. So yes, they do commission character designs, they do commission portraits, they do commission items and stuff. Just not as much as Paizo. Paizo commissions a ton of those. They don't really have the budget, I don't think, to do tons of illustrations, because you know illustrations cost the most. But D&D has a lot more illustration stuff because of the magazine. But yeah. Hey, Jeremy. Critting your image. Started a little while ago. I've talked about a good amount so far. But don't worry. It'll be on YouTube. Today's going to be kind of a casual, long, weird stream day. Basically, just to be totally honest with you guys, because you deserve it. As you know, I got tonsillitis and I couldn't speak. And because I like doing my crits where you can ask questions and stuff and I can give feedback, I just was waiting till I had my voice back and I didn't feel terrible to do them. And I basically lost about 18 days of July to being in the hospital with, you know, going back to the hospital with tonsillitis and taking crazy medication and all this shit. So I'm making up my hours because I try to do 10 to 12 hours a week for you guys here. So I'm making up those hours I missed this week for you. So what that means is there's going to be a couple really long sort of casual days where I'm just on here streaming for the whole day. This is going to be the first one. Well, not the first one. I already did one last week. This is the second one. So there might be parts where I shut my microphone off, which is coming soon because I have to eat something and drink coffee, and then I'll turn my microphone back on, and we'll talk some more. But I'll be on here for at least another 4 hours, probably, maybe more than that. Might not be doing this piece the whole time. Depends where we go with it, how I'm feeling about it. But yeah, this is going to be a longer day than we usually do. Because getting sick isn't an excuse. Isn't an excuse. So this fur was sharing an edge with this belt. I was making a little tangent. You know, if I shut that off, they're kind of just like parallel there, hugging each other. So I'm going to bring the fur over it in a few places and kind of make the fur taper down. Sorry, I'm just taking a look real quick. So I guess I wouldn't have a problem with him holding this horn here if the horn was fixed to something, because it looks like this arm is bearing weight. Like this arm could easily, this pose right here with the arm is the default I'm holding the scabbard of my sword pose. And the reason that that works is because the muscle is flexed and he's holding onto something that's weighted and in place. Without this being fixed to his body, he's just flexing his arm in midair and just nothing's there. You know, he's not pushing down on anything. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. It's not fixed in space, so it doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna try, before I completely change your arm, I'm gonna try to fix this horn to his belt and see if that works, which it probably will. If not, we'll just change the arm. But another thing, he's got these little gauntlets, and you know, I've seen those before. I know what you're referencing with the little Viking gauntlets, but again, with the you know, just it looks better to give them longer ones. 9 times out of 10, with a design like this. And what that's going to do is open up some new design avenues, basically. Because I'm not looking at this and saying, you know, make the leather gauntlet longer because longer gauntlets are cooler. What I'm saying is every piece of, you know, every piece of leather base on this guy is basically a canvas opportunity to work in some culture design. And the more canvas area you have, the more opportunities for design you have. So, oh, hold on. Mailman's here. 1 second. Hey. Back. Actually, Jeremy, that's a good idea. I might go eat too. I might eat and paint. But anyway, what I was saying is every flat area of leather is basically a workspace opportunity. I'm not saying add a ton because that'll break the balance of the design, but I am saying just look for areas where you can enhance those things, because now that you have this here, all this space in here, you know, you can work in some subtle Viking stuff, like some wind curls here. Some etched leather or some sewn in designs. Just look for opportunities to, I'm not saying cover this guy in patterns. I'm just saying look for little areas that you can maybe push to create a space where you can, you know, sell a little bit more of the culture. Because, you know, they're craftsmen. Yes, they stole stuff. Yes, they retooled it. But right in the term retool, you know, they're making new things out of old things. They're craftsmen. They like to etch and they like to hammer and they like to, you know, sew, and you want to make that apparent that there's some care put into the precious few things they have that are, you know, ornate. Dan, how did you create that pattern? Have you been doing numerous studies of patterns just for the sake of building that kind of library? No, I don't study patterns. I just look at them a lot. I'm familiar with Viking patterns just because I'm familiar with Viking stuff. Viking stuff can be all kinds of things, though. That's the thing you got to be careful for. So, like, this is just a basic, almost kind of Celtic curl pattern, which you see a lot of on their stuff. They also have knots, which was also appropriated from the Celts. They also have figurative stuff, but their figurative stuff is skewed in very specific ways. So, like, you know, the way that they designed people and stuff looks very elongated and weird. You know, the basic go-to is like the world tree. That's like a very Celtic thing, but it's, you know, the center of Viking mythology was the world tree. So that's entirely Celtic influenced, but it's a Viking thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. The way they wrote, the way they scripted things was very Mediterranean. Yeah. It's kind of, it's hard to explain. I would say basically just look at as many Viking artifacts as you can. As many of the surviving scriptures that they wrote that you can, as many pieces of actual Viking armor that have design in them, Viking jewelry. You start to get a sense for the stuff they were doing when you look at the things they crafted themselves. Because that's the thing that, you know, some Viking artifacts are things that they stole from other people, and they just had them. But then there's other ones that they actually crafted themselves. And, you know, I don't, not anymore, but I used to go to a lot of museums and look at stuff. I've got tons of books of that stuff because I'm just kind of fascinated with it. I wouldn't say study design, as in, like, look at a pattern and replicate it. I've never done that. But I do have, like, a big visual library of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I have access to lots of reference of that stuff. Like, let's see here. Yeah, like, sorry, I'm over at my bookshelf. You can hear me going through my books, which I have way too many of. But basically, I've got this is a great book. All of these books are great. All these eyewitness reference books are fantastic. So this one's good. It's really good. It's got some good stuff. You know. The weapons, the maps, the home building, how they built them, how they made their weapons, why they designed them that way, how they made their jewelry, why they made it that way. You know, these are just really good books. I have a ton of them. But, yeah. Good stuff. I've got probably, I'm looking right now, I think I've got 6 books on Viking design. I think. Anytime I see a book that I think I can use for character design, I just buy it. It's kind of a problem. I kind of have like this terrible OCD compulsion to just buy art books the second I see them. If there's one page in it that I think I can use, I just buy it. The result being I have way too many books. And then what I do is, I don't know if anyone else does this, this is going to make me sound like a serial killer, but what I do is every time I go to use the bathroom, I grab a book at random off my bookshelf, could be anything, and then I bring that in and I look through it and I read it while I do that. And I just kind of try to like memorize as much stuff as I can. So yeah. Sometimes it's James Gurney, sometimes it's Viking design, sometimes it's Chinese celestial patterns, uh, sometimes it's the Aztecs. You know, it's just at random. I'll just grab a book. I don't know what it's going to be. So I'm going to take... So every design should have repeating elements that balance it out. You always want to do that. For this guy, I'm seeing the leather as something that isn't too obtrusive. It's in small enough doses all over the design that you can get away with including it in a lot of places, and it'll make everything feel kind of cohesive and together. So right now in his upper body, you know, there's the belts, there's the gauntlets, it makes sense. Then I go down into his legs and I don't really see anything, so just to ground him with something that's everywhere, I'm going to pull the leather down here and darken it up a little tiny bit. It's a little too red, but that's okay. I'm going to pull the leather down here, and I'm going to do just a basic cross on the boot. The idea being that this is kind of like a bracer for the fabric that's wrapped around his leg. I'm going to reintroduce the fur down here too, probably. But just to pull that leather down and give this, you know, give this design a little bit more balance, I'm going to repeat that cross that's on his chest with the belts down here. The other thing to keep in mind, I mean, this is getting a little deep for like Dungeons and Dragons design, but the other thing to think about when you're thinking about a culture like the Vikings is not only did they steal stuff and visually appropriate things from other cultures, they changed their religion many times. So in the beginning, they were kind of like nature worshiping. There were a lot of animal deities, a lot of gods that assumed the forms of animals. They worshipped the world tree. There was a lot of plant worship, stuff like that. And then it turned into, you know, these are the gods of the elements. This god controls this god controls that. You know, it's not about, you know, the mountain and the people of the mountain. It's about this is the god that lives on the mountain, and this guy controls lightning, and this one's a blacksmith. And they started developing a pantheon. And then, you know, they decided to become Christians, but then they made their own weird form of Christianity. And then some of them rebelled against that, and they decided they wanted their old gods back, but they wanted to make people happy. So then Odin kind of became Jesus in a weird way, and they appropriated a bunch of Catholicism into their version of, you know, the Genesis story. And, you know, Odin is hung upside down from a tree, basically crucified for 3 days and 3 nights or whatever, and then he's born again as a god, and, you know, all this weird stuff happens. So they're not just visually appropriating stuff, they're also just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're making their own soup out of other people's ingredients. That's basically what it is. They're going, oh, Christianity has this ingredient. That's pretty good, but, you know, the Celtic people have this ingredient, and we like that too, so let's take that. Then you end up with this weird multiculture, basically, of little pieces of lots of things. And it's not just visually, is what I'm trying to say. It's not just in their design and the armor they wore and the jewelry they made. It's literally in their belief system. Where do you learn most of the things you know about all the world cultures and types of dress just from researching online and books? I mean, I do read a lot of stuff. I took a lot of classes when I was in school, when I was in college. I hated art school because, you know, it didn't teach me anything, but I was able to take other classes at the university I actually liked, like, you know, culture classes, history classes, mythology classes. I took as many of those as I could, which is really the only thing I got out of school that I use in my job, which is weird. I went to art school and I don't use any of my art classes in my work, but I do use all of my my lit and my mythology classes. Um, is it proven that their mythology came after Christianity? No, their mythology came before, during, and after Christianity. Like, it's a developing thing. The Vikings mythology started one way, developed into something else, then Christianity was introduced, then it changed, then it became another thing, then it went back to the old thing because some people didn't want to be Christian. Like, it's a big long line that just changed and changed and changed and changed. Basically, whoever was in charge could basically change it the way they wanted to change it. But yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, it totally changed. There was a huge feud when I can't remember which leader. I want to say it was I can't remember. I want to say it was Eric the Red was the one that was like, "No, we're going to be Christian now." I can't remember. But yeah, there was a huge uproar because a lot of them were like, "Well, no, because Odin's the shit, and I'm not doing that." So there was a big, you know, a big hubbub. More than a few people died because of that. But yeah. And then you get the thing you get in history a lot where basically it's like playground politics when that sort of thing starts happening. Well, the people that were pro Jesus with the Vikings were like, well, Jesus, he was crucified and then he came back to life and he had all these powers, so he's better. And then the other side goes, nuh-uh, Odin did that too. And they're like, he did? And they go, yeah. And then they make up a story about when he gets crucified to a tree. And they start changing little things here and there to make it seem like their guy's cooler than the other guy. And then at the end, you end up with this totally different thing than what it used to be, but everybody accepts that that's the way it's always been, even though it hasn't. That's just kind of how things develop everywhere, but especially with them. The interesting thing about both of them, I think, is something you don't really think about, but a big reason I think it was easy for them to appropriate Christianity into their stuff. Like, I think the big reason they were able to appropriate it the way they were is because both cultures were an apocalypse culture. They went over to England and Scotland, and people were like, "Oh yeah, Jesus and end of days is going to come, and he's going to come back, and we're all going to get brought up to heaven, and the seas are going to boil." And they had Judgment Day, and then the Vikings already had a framework for Ragnarok. They knew how the world was going to end too, so they had a common thread in that both of them knew the world were going to end. They both accepted that as fact. It's just the details of how it was going to end were different, but both cultures and both belief systems were totally rooted in the fact that yeah, stuff's not going to be that great, and we're all going to kind of die and go to this place after this huge, massive catastrophe. I'm going to shut my mic off for a minute, a couple minutes, and quickly eat something while I paint. I'm not going to stop painting, but I need to. I'm going to be streaming for a long time today, so I want to make sure that I keep my energy going. So I'm going to have a bite, shut off my microphone. I'll be back though. So, yeah. See you in just a minute. Hello, I'm back. Ugh. Sorry, had to eat. Had to eat. It's a necessary thing. So anyway, I can't remember when I put my mic off, but I know it was before the sword and some other stuff. Basically, if you have any questions about anything I did while I was off having lunch, while I was painting, feel free to ask, and I'll be more than happy to talk about it. But yeah, I added a bunch of stuff and changed some other things. So. I added these plates to the center. These are new. These are basically bronze discs. They serve, number one is decoration. Number two, sometimes they were a mark of office. And number three, they had the added effect of being kind of a gut armor. So, you know, if an arrow hits them down there in the stomach, which would normally kill somebody, it's a better chance of being defended from it. So that was an added bonus. Yeah, I already pointed that out. I've broken it up a bit. I might push the arm with the bow out a bit more. But, I mean, basically, this is one of those things where I'd have to change the entire pose to do much more than I have. Like, originally I was going to have his arm coming out holding a sword that was going down like this, but that really doesn't change the fact that the whole body is kind of up and down. Basically, just next time you start, keep an eye out for the rectangular thing we talked about at the beginning of the stream when I drew the box. Watch out for that. I mean, this is serviceable. The pose is kind of flat. I'm probably going to play with the arm a bit more before we're done. But yeah, just watch out for that. It's a very, it's a common thing that a lot of people fall into without even realizing they're falling into it. I've had my share of falling into it. I think everybody does for quite a while. It's hard to get out of. I'm going to focus primarily on the design of the character and how to push it more to make it more acceptable for the D&D audience, which is what I've been doing. I did change the pose a tiny bit. I might change the legs a bit too. They're not really holding the weight. But, yeah. Basically, this leg is, number one, it's a little too thin. Try and thicken it up real quick. You gotta figure, you got a muscled leg under there of a fairly big guy. And then there's a layer of cloth, probably a layer of fur to keep it warm, and then the leather on top. So it's gonna be fairly thick. That's one thing to watch out for always. I've mentioned it before, but when you're designing a character that's wearing layers, they're going to look very big because the human body, I mean, like, yeah, the anatomy's already there, but there's one thing you see in a lot of portfolios that makes no sense, that happens all the time, where people basically draw anatomy and then they draw the costume as if it was painted onto the anatomy because they've spent so much time getting the anatomy right that they're kind of like subconsciously afraid of drawing over it. Um, when people are wearing armor, especially, or like, heavy layers of stuff, you're not going to see their anatomy like at all. It's going to be really, really thick on top of it. Like, it's going to be a lot of stuff. Like, this right here is still basically the outline of what a human leg would be if you were to just draw a body without the 3 layers plus he's got on top of it. So just keep in mind that you're adding inches to the diameter of every cylinder on the body when you put these costumes on people. If anyone from Art Camp is watching that has a particular piece they'd really, really need help with, or they'd really, really like some advice on, I'm probably going to do, it depends how long this goes, but probably going to do one more today after I do these two. And then I'm going to do another one tomorrow. So if you have something you're really pressed with, feel free to post it in the Art Camp thread. Even if you've already posted it, you can post it again with just a bump and say, like, I heard you say on the stream you wanted us to repost or something, and then explain why you need help with it, what it is. And I'll be happy to take a look at it. Basically, I'm streaming all day today, pretty much. I'll be streaming very late at night for people in other time zones tomorrow. And then Monday, I'm going to be doing, or Monday or Tuesday, I haven't decided which, I'm going to be doing another, like, 5-hour session, just because I got to make up the hours from when I was sick, because I lost a lot of time. But, yeah. Lost a lot of time. Oh, all I just said, Dorothy, if you missed it, was if anyone listening from Art Camp has something they really, really need help with, I'm going to be doing probably one more after I crit Jeremy's thing, and then another one tomorrow night late, and then Monday or Tuesday I'll be doing another very long session. So feel free to repost, even if you've already posted it in the Art Camp thread. Feel free to repost it and just say, like, I'm reposting this because I need help with blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Explain what the issue is or what you're trying to get done, and I'll be happy to look at it. So I put some fur under the gauntlet. That's a common thing that happened. It was like a layer of padding, basically, and for extra warmth. so the leather wasn't rubbing against the skin, and so they could stay warm. I'm also going to bring it out over the palm a bit so you don't have this big awkward, just a hand coming out of that cylinder. Gonna interrupt that edge of the leather and the skin a bit by bringing this over. And then underneath, hints of gray to show that the fur is underneath it. This was pretty common in a lot of cultures, Viking culture, Mongolian culture. Basically any culture that had to deal with mountain winters, putting fur around and underneath layers of things and using fur as a base to wrap stuff was very, very common, just because it acted as an extra layer of padding and insulation. How refined would the sketches need to be? Everything in the sketch needs to be clear. It needs to be like a finished compositional drawing. You know what I mean? Like I gotta, or at least a finished compositional sketch. Like I need to look at it and understand what you're trying to do and where things are supposed to be. Whenever people ask like how finished stuff should be for a crit, it's like I need to see all of your intention. That's the thing. Like it needs to be, more than a thumbnail, less than a final drawing, I guess would be the way to put it. I need more than a thumbnail. I need, I don't need a final finished rendered drawing though. Cool. Yeah, whenever you're ready, post them up. I'll take a look for sure. Is there a I shouldn't be asking you guys this, I should know this, but honestly I don't know. Is there an Art Camp 3 for August, or is this it? I've been so out of it with the hospital visits and the being sick, I never checked. It's just dawning on me right now. He hasn't mentioned anything yet. Sorry, looking at some carving stuff in my book. Hey Dan, kind of random, but I've always wondered, why do Bedouins wear black in the desert? Wouldn't white be better since it reflects sunlight? As far as I know, and I might be wrong, you should check on this. Check online or something. I believe Bedouins wear black because even though white reflects more light, I believe long term it retains more heat. I think that's what it is. I think the black absorbs more, but in the end it ends up being cooler. But I'm not entirely sure. I have heard about it before on some show. It must have been some documentary or something. But yeah, you should look it up online. Because I honestly can't tell you if that's the case. How do I get better at making something more make believe? I mean, use less reference. I guess that's the obvious answer. I'm trying to think of if there's a better way to phrase it. If you want to make something more make believe, then make believe more of it. You know what I mean? And then supplement the reference later. Um, I mean, that's one thing everybody should do anyway. Is never look at reference until you've done your sketch. Never look at what something looks like until you've done your sketch. Make sure it's your idea first, and then bring reference into the equation. But more make believe, you'd have to be more specific. I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't know. I guess just make believe more of it. Go from the top of your head more. I'd offer more advice, but I kind of need to know what you're referencing or talking about. Making a make-believe character, wearing armor or whatever for something like this is different than making a make-believe children's book character, and both of those are different than making a make-believe, I don't know, fairy tale land painting or landscape, or I don't know. I think the answer for all of them is just do more from your head, but I don't really know specifically what you're trying to do, so. Let's see here. I'm looking for something specific. gonna bullshit some knots. So bear with me. This hem here is just a... If this was actually Viking clothing, this hem here would definitely have stitching in it. It would have some kind of pattern, so I'm just going to use that light blue as a secondary thread color and just bullshit some quick implied knots. Yeah, that's terrible, eh? It's absolutely horrible. What you just did is a crime. It's a crime. Sorry, Black Lotus. I mean, you can try to explain it. I don't care if it's wordy. I mean, whatever. Just post it in the chat. So I'm going to say that these metal plates, one thing they used to do is sew them into fabric from the behind. So I'm gonna assume that's what these are. That means I don't have to paint any straps or anything holding them in place, which is good because that would clutter things up. So these will be sewn in. Okay. I guess the best way I can explain it is like this. I can make something up, and the idea could be cool in my head, so I sketch and sketch and sketch, but then I'll get to a spot where I'm not sure about something and look up reference, but I can't find the right reference, whether it be for the angle or the material. Well, there's an answer to your question, but you're not going to like it. The answer to your question is you just have to study a lot and you have to work more. The only answer to your problem is time and experience. The more you study and the more you work and the more of like a visual library you have access to in your head without reference, the more your ability to paint directly what's in your head without looking at anything is going to improve. And you'll get to a point eventually where you're not even looking at reference anymore because you're going to, from experience of doing it so many times or from your sheer ability to, paint stuff, by flexing that muscle as much as you have, you'll be able to just paint things from the get-go, just right onto the canvas and get them to a place where they were pretty much what you had in mind and not that much is sacrificed. What you're describing right now is just a shortcoming of not having worked long enough, not having, studied enough, which is fine because that's, everybody starts there. That's, everybody does. But yeah, I mean, you can totally get past that, but the unfortunate answer is that the only way to get past it is to just work a lot for a really long time. That's really it. It's really the only answer. Work yourself through the reference phase of your life, basically. Get to a point where the only reference you need is, your mind's eye, basically. Yeah, I mean, even then you might still use reference. Tons of artists do, but it's going to be very, very secondary reference. It's not going to be like, oh, I sketched a pose and then I had to check the anatomy, so I had to take a photo or whatever. It's going to be, I drew the anatomy and it's done. I drew the costume and that's done. I don't really know what bronze looks like compared to gold, so I'm looking at some photos of bronze. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be very secondary reference once you get to that point. Yeah, everybody goes through that though. Everybody goes through a phase where they have an awesome idea in their head and they can't translate it to the page because your muscle just isn't there yet. You know what I mean? It's like your brain and your artistic ability to take what's in your brain and put it on a canvas. That's a muscle. It's the same thing as me punching a punching bag. I can't, it's my first couple of days doing it. I can't punch that bag very hard. Eventually, I'm going to be really good at it though. But you got to keep at it. You can't let that muscle atrophy. You got to use it a lot. I mean, that's why all this accidental, not to get off topic, but that's a big part of why all this like accidental plagiarism stuff is happening now is because everybody knows that, you can just find reference on Google and what the mistake people are making is that they go on there and they find a photo that's similar to their painting but not quite. And to make their painting feel more realistic or more complete or more accurate, they start pulling from that photo and then they pull too much and then they pull way too much and then pretty soon it's looking just like the photo. But you've been working on it so gradually that you don't really notice. And then people put it up on the internet and people go, I saw that photo, you just stole it. And you don't even realize that that's what you did. But like, I know a lot of people that have fallen into that trap where it's like, that's just that thing I saw on Tumblr. And it's like, oh shit. I think everybody goes through that phase where you just kind of, part of your finishing process is like, you do your sketch. I think everybody goes through that phase, at least digitally. You draw your thumbnail, then you draw it out, and then you go find supplemental reference on the internet, and then slowly what was your painting becomes a collage of photos you found that you've placed and rendered. And it's like, that's, I know a lot of people that are still stuck in that phase, and like you don't want to be stuck there, because that's bad. You're not really painting at that point. You're at the mercy of, you know, whatever you can find on the internet. It's a bad place to be. I mean, even some really big name illustrators are still stuck in that trap. It's a hard trap to get out of. Once that's part of your creative process, it's very hard to get out of it, because your process is your process. Like once your mind is set to a certain way of working, getting out of that habit is incredibly difficult. It's like trying to lose weight. It's like once the body's at a certain weight, it wants to stay that way. You know, like your body doesn't know it's fat. It's programmed to hold on to that weight because it still thinks we're a culture that needs to survive in the winter. You know what I mean? Like once your brain is set into a certain routine of like, this is what I do, and then this is what I do, and then this is what I do. Once that's ingrained and it's not part of like a learning process anymore, it is incredibly hard to break that and to teach yourself a new way to do things. Incredibly hard. How do you get out of that? Paint and draw from life as much as possible? I wouldn't even say paint and draw from life. I mean, that's good too. I would draw from the top of your head as much as possible. Honestly. Drawing from life is good too, but like, even drawing from life, you're at the mercy of the thing in front of you. It's kind of like, it's the same problem as Google, is where, yes, in Google the images are static and you can't move them around and find your own perspective, but even drawing from life, you know, you're at the mercy of the thing you're drawing. I would say I would do like a 50-50 split of drawing from the top of your head with no reference at all and drawing from life. Draw from the top of your head as much as you can, because that's the only way to identify what you're really bad at. When you put all the reference away and you just draw from the top of your head, you go, oh wow, it turns out I'm way worse at drawing birds than I thought I was. And then you know that, you know, when you go draw from life, you should look at some birds. Or, oh wow, I'm really bad at hands. Next time you draw from life, you should really focus on hands. Like, that's the one thing I don't think anyone does anymore. Like, very few people just draw without looking at anything. And it's like the most helpful thing you can do. But people are like afraid of how bad they are or something, because of the weird like online culture where you think you're going to get made fun of or whatever. Everybody wants to be impressive all the time. Like, nobody just honestly draws from the top of their head because they're like afraid of what they don't know. And like, that's the biggest mistake you can make. Like, there's a million ways to, you know, go on Google and find things to help, or go into Photoshop and add textures and effects and make some crazy mess of what looks like rendering to people, or like, you know, there's tons of tricks to making something look done without actually doing anything. But like, when's the last time any of you picked up a sketchbook with nothing to go from and just filled a page with the best of your ability? It's like, that's what's going to help. That's what's going to let you know what you need to work on. Yeah, but I mean, that's just a practice thing. You're saying your imagination sketches probably look. You're saying they look horrible next to your life drawing sketches. That's probably because you draw from life. Well, number one, it's because you draw from life way more than you draw from imagination. And number two, it's because when you draw from life, you have a reference. You're not drawing from nothing. You're copying something. Drawing from life is still copying. Something you copy is always going to look more accurate than something you do from the top of your head, always, because there's a reference directly in front of you. Saying that your imagination drawings don't look as good as your life drawings is kind of saying nothing at all, because they're not the same thing. It's a different exercise. Drawing from the top of your head has nothing to do with drawing from life. Drawing from life is an exercise in recreation. That's the way to think about it. Drawing from life is an exercise in recreation, whereas drawing from your head is just pure creation. They're not the same thing. Creation and recreation are not the same thing. With enough practice, anybody can duplicate anything. That's the thing, is like it's a different muscle that you're flexing. Drawing from the top of your head exercises your idea muscle. That's where your creativity comes from. Drawing from life exercises your recreation and duplication muscle. That's where your accuracy comes from. So theoretically, if you work on both muscles constantly, not only can you create something very imaginative and original from your originality part of the brain, but then you can draw it accurately and convey what you had in your head very well, because you've drawn so much from life that you understand how forms work, how light works, etc. Those are the skills that back that up. That's basically what I just said, XDay. I said draw from the top of your head and then look at what's really bad and go, oh wow, I'm really bad at that. I should do that next time. That's essentially the same thing. You're making a list of what you're not that good at, and you're addressing it one by one by one. And it's always going to fluctuate. There's never going to be a day where you draw from the top of your head and you go, I have learned all of the things. There is nothing visually that I cannot do. Like there's always going to be something. And if there isn't something, you're not trying hard enough. You never stop studying. Or I guess you shouldn't stop studying. But, yeah, I mean, no one's ever going to be good at everything. It's impossible. It's physically impossible. Your brain doesn't have enough storage space in it to do that. Again, I'm going to use the gym metaphor because it's the most accurate. If I was to do nothing but lift weights with my left arm until it was totally ripped, and then go, yeah, my left arm's ripped now, and then I stopped and I did nothing but lift weights with my right arm, by the time my right arm is ripped, my left arm is not going to be that ripped anymore. It's going to decrease because I'm not maintaining it. So it's like there's always stuff to work on. Yes, you can get better at some things, but once you stop doing those entirely, you get worse at it. It's a give and take always. You got to do all the things all the time. Yeah, imagination always has to come first, I think. That's my opinion. Some people might disagree. But I think the first step in any drawing, painting, creative endeavor should be your sketch in your sketchbook from the top of your head. What is the idea that you actually have? What do you want to do? I think that's the way everybody should start. Some people would disagree with me. That's fine. Some people will say, no, I go on my favorite Tumblrs and I look for what images jump out at me. And if I see an environment I really like, then I go, ooh, I bet I could do that environment, but slightly differently. And that's how I start. Fine, fine. I disagree, but if that's who you are and that's what you want to do, that's fine. I just feel like, especially now with the digital thing and with so much internet recycling of ideas, creativity, like real actual creativity, because creativity is different than creating. You can create stuff all day and not be creative. You know what I mean? Like, people don't understand that. I can produce images all day and none of them can be creative. Like, that's the thing. They can all be derivative. That's the thing. Like, nobody seems to understand that anymore. So, I think real, actual creativity from the top of your head, trying to come up with ideas and things that only you can think of, I think that is being lost in a big way. So, I would argue that that's where everybody should start. But that's just me. I would not be surprised if Noah agrees with me, Dorothy. I have not talked to him about this particular topic, but I would not be surprised if he agreed. And just a quick mention, just because I feel like it's worth mentioning. If you're super nervous about drawing from the top of your head and you don't like the results and you think you've got a long way to go, you don't have to show those sketches to people online. This whole conceptart.org fallout culture of everybody has to show everybody everything they're doing. That's something you have to buy into, and it's totally legitimate to buy into it if that's what you like. If that's what makes you work best and that keeps you in check and keeps you honest and working hard, sure, do it. But if you just want to draw for you in your sketchbook and you don't want to show anyone, don't show anyone. As long as you're doing it, do the hard work, be honest with yourself. Lying about it's only going to hurt you. But yeah, like, if you don't want to show anyone your stuff, you don't have to show anyone your stuff. I know a lot of people whose sketchbook is like sacred. Like, they don't show anybody anything they do. But like, I've seen their sketchbook in person and I'm like, you've never shown anyone these hundreds of pages of beautiful things. And they're like, yeah, this is like where I figure things out and then I do my paintings later. I don't want to show people this, like, stage of it. And I totally understand that. That makes sense to me. Hey, people. I might go make more coffee in just a second. Is the Massive Black Workshop good for networking with fantasy publishers like Paizo? No, that's the wrong place. The Massive Black Workshop is for artists and occasionally art directors of entertainment companies like video games and films. If you want to network with companies like Wizards of the Coast and Paizo, you go to a LuxCon. That's the big one. Or Spectrum Live. Spectrum Live, all those people usually go. That's a lot of artists too, though, Spectrum Live. But most, book publishers, game publishers, stuff like that, tabletop game publishers, I mean, they usually go to a LuxCon and Spectrum Live. The Massive Black Workshop is usually by artists for artists. It's a great experience. I'm not saying don't go. I go to all of them. They're amazing. You get to meet people, watch people work. Occasionally there are art directors there, but they're always from game companies like Blizzard or Naughty Dog or Riot. Yeah, it's pretty much just artists working on stuff. It's a good place to, get your portfolio looked at, possibly find a job, though. It's a really, really good experience. But, yeah, I'll be at a LuxCon this year, I believe, as will, Noah, and I think James Zapata's going, and Sean Murray, I believe, is also going. I think we're all going this year. I think pretty much everyone I know who does this kind of stuff is going to be at this one. Dan, can you please take a look at this? Is the composition alright? Let me take a look. You don't need as much ground as you have. Let me pull it into Photoshop real quick. 2 seconds. 2-second distraction here. Oh, I clicked that thing again, didn't I? So many new Photoshop things I'm not used to yet. I love CC. Photoshop CC is the best decision I've made in a long time. I mean, yeah, you can get away with this. I'm not sure what this guy's holding. Looks like it must be a shield, right? I don't know what else it could be. Shields are usually bigger. So compositionally, if you made the shield bigger, this is a cooler shape to work with. And then the sword could come over it. The body could go down here. But yeah. No, yeah, that's good. It's a diamond. Nice little diamond composition. And then if you bump the shadow out like this, it'll make kind of an implied triangle with a diamond in it. But no, yeah, that's a fine composition for a character. What makes CC better than older versions? I'm not going to say one's better or worse than the other. I mean, some people love Photoshop 7. Some people love CS4. Like, whatever. For me, I like CC because it's a subscription and it's cheap. And it's cheap enough that it doesn't cost me more than $20 a month. And I can tax deduct it at the end of the year. So it's like, I think it's like $250 a year after taxes. And I can just take that out of my taxes as a freelancer. So it's basically free. Yeah, and it keeps you up to date with all the most current things. If anything changes or gets improved in Photoshop, you instantly get access to it. And it's got the autosave feature that they tried in CS6. Like my computer, I have a Mac, so I don't blue screen, I gray screen. I had a gray screen for the first time in a year and a half yesterday. And I had 8 files open for a client that I was working on simultaneously. And because I had CC, I didn't lose any of those files. When Photoshop crashes or your computer shuts down, it has an autosave feature that keeps everything where you had it when the computer died, which is like the greatest thing ever. Like literally the absolute greatest thing. Like I love it so much. It's literally like I could kiss the guy who invented it, or girl. I don't know who invented it, but my God, is it fucking awesome. But yeah, so I mean, if you got $20 a month, I mean, think about it really. That's, if you don't like the version of Photoshop you have and you have $20 a month, I mean, that's what? That's going out and getting a cheeseburger twice. I mean, CC's really not that expensive. Something about the tattoos was bothering me, and I thought it was the design, and it's not the design. It was just that they were sitting too low on the face. They should come right up to the bottom of the eye socket. Kind of like he's crying. Yeah, maybe. Maybe he's sad. Maybe a lifetime of rape and pillage has left him wondering if there's not something better for life. Maybe he feels like he made the wrong choice. These eyebrows are kind of plain. I'm gonna make them kind of match the hair. Give them some frill. And a bit more emotion. And some color. I'm still pumped from seeing. I saw Conan the Barbarian last night, the original one, at a movie theater in town that was screening it. Ooh, it was good. It was good to see that on a big screen. That was a good experience. I'm still excited from it. Never watched it. You should watch it. It's really, really good. No, it's actually good. It's not ironically good. It's actually good. I mean, it was like 1983 or some shit, so some of the special effects you have to kind of accept. There's a couple puppets in there that might be a little awkward for people that only watch, modern movies, but no, it's a good movie. Some really good costume designs. Really, really good art direction. Amazing score. But yeah, I mean, it is Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting things, some of which are puppets, so if you have a hard time accepting things that aren't CG, then, maybe it's not for you. Here you go. Here's a nice screen cap of some of the awesome art design. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm gonna make coffee. Take a quick break. Yeah. I'm gonna make coffee, take a quick break. I'm not gonna shut the stream off though. I'm just gonna mute myself real quick. I'll be back probably 5 minutes. So yeah, if you guys need a drink or anything, or you wanna get up, walk around, stretch out your legs so you don't die of deep vein thrombosis, you know, just good stuff to do. I'll be back here in probably 5 minutes after my coffee's ready and I've got my bottle of water, and we'll go into wrapping this up and then getting onto the female part of this design, and or this set, I guess I should say. But yeah, cool. So real quick before I go, I'm going to full screen. I'm going to zoom in on the dude. Hopefully you can see him okay. But, you know, we've changed some stuff, moved some stuff around, but really just in terms of the design and the like, you know, the cool factor for people that want to play D&D and find armor and discover cultures and stuff, like, you know, just look at the difference that little bit makes so far. We're not done yet, but add some weight, add some regality, add some wear and tear. It just feels more fleshed out, feels more believable, feels a little more lived in and put together. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, I will be back shortly. Hey everybody, I'm back. I think I'm gonna put on music because I've been talking for 3 hours basically. I'm gonna keep working. If you have questions, put them in the chat. If I see a lot of questions, I might shut the mic off. But let's see. Yeah, I don't see that much though. So I'm basically just gonna go into the design, and we can talk about more of it at the end. But yeah, just so I stay alive here, I'm gonna put on some music. Apologies if you don't like the music. If I shut the music off, I will write on the screen and type in the chat, hey, the music's off. LOL. Okay. Hey there. Oh, really loud. Whoops. Hey, so Jeremy, last thoughts on this before I go. I could honestly keep critting this for quite a while, but basically, I added a bunch of stuff, worked on some other things that were there. The last thing I was trying to do real quick before I got off of here was just to drop in some very basic, just shadows on a multiply layer, just to show how the cloth and stuff would wrap on the forearms, and just to get some dimensionality in there, because the shirt was pretty plain compared to how we had fleshed out everything else in the crit. Basically, yeah, I mean, you've seen the stuff going forward. We're gonna do another long form crit, design crit on culture for the girl next time, and talk about how to play that up. One thing we did while the music was on was, you can't just have a hanging cloak, basically, for anyone watching. This cloak that was there, that has to come from somewhere. It's either got to be sewn into the back of his shirt, which, you could do, but you don't want to leave that up to the viewer necessarily, unless you're also showing a back view of the character. You want to explain everything so it makes sense. So I quickly threw it on a layer and worked some stuff in. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously rough to paint over. I'm not going to be able to go in and finish everything, sadly, as much as I'd like to. But just some quick shadows on a multiply layer on certain forms we didn't really get to touch, just to flesh it out a bit more, cast shadow in here. But yeah, the big things to keep in mind when designing culture or characters for D&D is you want the character to look lived in. You want to make it look like everything has a purpose. Even if it's designed cool, that's awesome, but you want to make sure there's some kind of functionality to it. You want to make sure that the design is interesting and it includes a lot of cool elements from the specific culture you're going into. So, the leather, the bronze, the chiseled little design work stuff, we put that all over the place to balance them out, along with the leather straps. Pulled the blue in from the pants to in here to the blue sash, the blue triangles, the blue face paint. That was your call. That was a really good call. That was balancing it out. I basically followed that with the leather, brought the leather down into the boots, took a shot for some reference of the face, played up part of the helmet. But yeah, so for D&D, number one rule, it has to look cool and interesting. But on top of looking cool and interesting, you want things to function, you want things to make sense, you want things to be believable, you want it to look like everything belongs to the same person or world or culture. But yeah, and I think this design's getting to a place where it's definitely achieving all of that. So yeah, some final things, just when rendering it out. Just watch out for, I saw you did a shadow pass on the forums that was using like a multiply layer with a blue, because the typical rule is cool is shadows. Just watch out. The shadows I'm laying in here with a multiply, aside from the face, because the face is getting a little gray, admittedly. I just don't have time before my live stream cuts out to do it at the 4-hour limit, basically. Yeah, just watch out for that. Bump the warms in the face a little bit. Doesn't have to be too much, because he is in a cold culture and he's a grown dude. But yeah, cool designs, good stuff. Just keep it balanced, keep it interesting. We'll talk about the girl next time. And the very last thing I'm going to do that looks awkward before my clock runs out here is get some highlights in the steel up here, because it's looking a little imbalanced with the rest of the helmet. So do that real fast. And yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. I'll be on late tomorrow night, very late EST, probably 10 or 11 my time. So it's going to be late for people in other time zones, and then we'll be back later on Monday to talk about more stuff. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.